Greetings, fellow armchair Imagineers. Tiki here, and welcome to another long-delayed episode of Hidden TIkis, the show where I take you through all my favorite obscure, underrated, and forgotten elements of Disney parks and films. On today's episode, we'll be tackling a subject that's not so much obscure, but certainly underappreciated. In the summer of 2003, Pirates of the Caribbean: The Curse of the Black Pearl became one of the biggest sleeper hits of the decade. Who would have thought a movie based on a theme park attraction of all things would go on to become one of this generation's defining blockbuster franchises? Though no initial plans were made for a sequel, the Big Cheese quickly changed their tune soon after the first film became an overnight sensation. And thus, Pirates of the Caribbean: Dead Man's Chest premiered in the summer of 2006 to record-breaking box office, and yet a very underwhelming response from critics and fans alike. It took me a couple of viewings to come to my ultimate conclusions on the film. I'll tell you this right now. As a young, teenage theme park junkie practically obsessed with the first movie at the time, the experience I had with the midnight screening paints it in a shade of nostalgia that's hard for me to see past. Having said that, I'll try my hardest to give a fair critique of this film and point out exactly what I like about it and exactly what I think makes it so good, apart from personal nostalgia. So, with that in mind, let's jump right to it. Instead of going over a beat-by-beat synopsis of the story, I'm instead going to pinpoint certain elements that really stuck out to me, and how they all came together to form what I consider to be one of my favorite straight-up adventure movies of the 2000s. I consider Curse of the Black Pearl to be an excellent example of the new Hollywood style, while Dead Man's Chest represents a more modern-day summer blockbuster feel. Having said that, this is a damn fun popcorn flick. It has a great mix of humor, action, intriguing character development, exotic locales, and one of my favorite elements of the film, its use of famous characters and nautical lore to help drive its story. Davy Jones and his crew are a seriously gnarly bunch. I absolutely adore the idea that his crew becomes more and more a part of the Flying Dutchman the longer they're aboard the doomed vessel. Speaking of which, how's that for a badass design? Of course, Davy Jones himself is something of a Lovecraftian nightmare. Though almost completely CGI, the Kraken is one of the most realistic creatures I've seen this side of Jurassic Park. Look at all those teeth, man. I can't help it. I just love the entire aesthetic of these guys. Does that make me, entirely super messed up? I'm probably going to get a lot of heat for this, but in my mind, the Cannibal Island scene kind of solidifies this whole series as the new Indiana Jones. Now, I know, grab your torches and pitchforks. I've compared Pirates to Indiana Jones on the forum before, and people have gotten all up in arms about me. I know, it's a terrible thing to say, and I should just be hung for it. But what are you going to do? I think that Pirates of the Caribbean and Indiana Jones, they really do have that similar playful style, the way they do the action scenes, how everything's so over the top. And yeah, I think the chase on Cannibal Island just really sets the tone. It establishes the over-the-top style that Gore Verbinski's going for. That style definitely didn't work in At World's End, and apparently it didn't work in The Lone Ranger. But for me, his over-the-top style works in spades in this movie, but I guess since I'm making this video, clearly I'm in the minority about that. I appreciate this film much like how I appreciate the legendary attraction it's based on, by taking in all the little details. One of my favorite such details is how Jack is introduced in the movie. One can only imagine the crazy set of circumstances that led him into that coffin. I like how the movie doesn't go out of its way to explain the infamous drawing of the key, and instead lets the visual serve as a bit of representation for how Sparrow is, well, kinda losing it at the beginning of the story.
Gee, Tiki, you mean it's Symbol!
Just stop! Only Film Brain's allowed to make that joke, and it's getting old even for him. Make fun of it all you want, but I really, really love the image of that standoff near the end of the film where Davy Jones is on land and he's standing in the bucket of water. I don't know. It's sort of ridiculous. It's definitely ridiculous in a Gore Verbinski style way. but I think it just fits so much with the character and the tone and the world that they've established. It's completely over the top, but in the moment with the cinematography and the music, I mean, I've got to say, for me personally, it really works. Every little character in this movie has a great flavor that combines into quite the tasty blend. Pintel and Rigetti aren't yet at the point of being overused, and serve as a great R2-D2 C-3PO style comedic relief. The good kind of obnoxious, in this case at least. Governor Swan isn't given a lot of screen time, but serves his role well. It's interesting to see him stripped of his power and in a position of such weakness. Clearly where Swan and Norrington are in the first and second movie are meant to draw parallel between each other. It's a shame that they never get a scene together. Will Turner's character starts out on a quest to rescue his bride-to-be after pretty much the biggest downer of a wedding ever. Soon after meeting back up with his rogue brethren, he becomes completely entangled in a plot to rescue his estranged father from his doomed afterlife aboard the Flying Dutchman. This becomes the central focus of his story arc for the rest of the trilogy. A plot element I thought was handled in a fascinating way here, but sadly went on to make Turner's character lean way more on the unlikable side in the third film. I must admit, though, Tia Dalma's famous Touch of Destiny line gives me chills when you look at it in the context of Will becoming the captain of the Flying Dutchman. Even Elizabeth gets a storyline in this movie that I can really get behind. I really enjoy how the writers just didn't leave her on the sidelines. On the contrary, she really gets a lot to do in this movie. I know that the girl posing as a boy in a man's world has been done quite a lot in the Disney world. Mulan! But, I mean, it works good here, in my opinion. But, of course, the thing about Elizabeth that really steals the show for me is her climactic kiss that pretty much simultaneously stabs both Jack and Will in the back. I mean, who can forget something like that? It really was a shocking moment in the theater. One of my favorite examples of an idea that gets further developed in the second film is that of Bootstrap Bill, Will Turner's father. Bootstrap is a character that I actually really like. I don't think he gets a lot of credit in the Pirates of the Caribbean universe. I especially love that starfish on his eye. It's a great character design. The thing I like about Bootstrap's character is the contrast between the badass, heroic pirate that we hear about in the first movie and the worn-down, defeated, almost pathetic pirate that he is in the second movie. As a member of Davy Jones' crew, perhaps one of the oldest members of his crew, Bootstrap is really sort of just decrepit and worn down and part of the ship, and he's really pretty much given up all hope, at least until his son comes back into the picture. Far and away my favorite element of the film is how they handle the character of Norrington. Much like how Bootstrap Bill is worn down and decrepit, Norrington starts his story almost in a pile of crap. I almost wonder why the writers didn't shoehorn the wallowing with the pigs gag into Norrington's intro, especially considering how much use they get out of the infamous dog with the keys this time around. I always love a redemption story. Tales of former men of honor getting trudged through the mud and being put to the ultimate personal test of selfishness versus selflessness. Well, I'm certainly not a fan of the rushed way his storyline ends in At World's End. I think the stepping stones to that heroic act are laid out beautifully in this film. A lot of small touches in the atmosphere really help broaden the scope of the world. Tia Dalma's shack, for example, an obvious ode to the iconic Blue Bio section of the attraction, serves as a treasure trove of set design that really puts the wheels of the story in motion. Oh, those boots. Clever, clever, clever.
Boots? I'll show you boots. Just pick these up in Frontierland along with my new hat from Adventureland. Isn't it so cool? Oh yeah, I'm so stylish and hipster and ha ha ha. Hipster Donald loves his boots.
The most satisfying element is how each character has their own individual goals and motivations, and they're laid out in such an extravagant manner in the final act. I can't help but appreciate how underrated Dead Man's Chest is, just in terms of how well each character fits into the puzzle. It's certainly no American Beauty, but in the context of a brainless blockbuster popcorn flick, it's pretty impressive. All the different character motivations come together in what I really consider to be one of the best action set pieces in this modern day and age of climaxes involving heaps of CGI. The water wheel fight is truly a stunning and altogether creative piece of choreography. It's the kind of over-the-top situation that I love seeing in a Gore Verbinski film when done properly. The fact that Jack, Will, and Norrington all have very different and clear-cut personal reasons for wanting to get their hands on the chest in this scene is exactly what makes it so satisfying and fun to see play out. The last 10 minutes of the film plays out less like a proper movie and more like a season finale of Lost. Cliffhangers are thrown at our faces a mile a minute with absolutely no mercy. It's a bit out of the ordinary in terms of proper film structure, but exciting as hell to watch play out in the context of a grand, epic conclusion to the middle of an uber-popular trilogy. Bam! Elizabeth sacrifices Jack and he's swallowed by the Kraken. Boom! Davy Jones discovers his heart's been stolen and curses Jack Sparrow's name. Kerpow! Norrington got away with the heart and is now presenting it to Beckett in exchange for clearing his name. Kablammo! Tia Dalma is putting together a ragtag crew to travel to insert inevitable terrible third movie title here. Headed by none other than... oh my god. It's the Barbosa! This moment right here kind of sums up how I feel about this movie. It's just so awesome. It's just so fanboy pleasing. It's unbelievable. I remember the midnight screening for this movie. When this moment came on, when Barbosa walked down the stairs and the monkey was with him and he took the bite of that apple, I mean, there was just complete pandemonium, literally unlike anything else I've ever seen in a movie theater to this day. People were going nuts. People were screaming. People were shouting. I literally could not understand that last line Barbosa said. I had to go and look it up. And keep in mind, this was a time in the internet where it wasn't quite so easy to look up every single little known fact about a movie. I had to do some actual research about that. But yeah, seeing Barbosa back, at least in my theater, was definitely a huge, huge thing. It was a big deal.
And in general, that's my thoughts on Pirates of the Caribbean: Dead Man's Chest. This was really a bad subject matter to pick for my second episode of Hidden TIkis, considering Hidden TIkis is supposed to be about obscure Disney, and Pirates of the Caribbean is, needless to say, it's about as unobscure as you could possibly get. So, next episode, it will be more hipsterific, because I will be going into the history and my personal memories of the Storybook Land canal boats and the Casey Jr. circus train at Disneyland. An exclusive to Disneyland that's one of my favorite experiences in the park, even if it's just tiny, tiny miniatures. So stay tuned for that. You should be seeing the Florida Project and Scary Adventures sometime in the near future. Can't wait to see the next project, Pokemon Snap, and take care, everyone.